The weight of the news settled over the frontier village like a thick, suffocating fog. After the villagers heard that the cultist Hugo had taken control of the Knoll colony using his authority as their leader, widespread panic erupted. Terror was not a new sensation for these people, but it was sharper this time, cutting deeper into their weary hearts. While terrified, they began cursing, their voices trembling with a mixture of anger and absolute hopelessness, saying, "Not again." The words echoed through the narrow dirt paths between their modest homes. A cult got involved, one man cried out, his face pale as ash. "The devil is coming! The devil!" The cry was taken up by others, a chorus of despair that threatened to break the spirit of the entire community. They believed there was no way they could endure this time. The sheer weight of a cultist's influence over a monster colony was a death sentence in their eyes. Seeing the villagers panicking, the village chief remarked with a worried look that although they sent a request for reinforcements to Count Ventura, the closest noble, it would take at least 7 days to arrive. The chief's hands shook as he spoke, his eyes scanning the horizon where the dark tree line hid their impending doom. 7 days was an eternity when monsters were already at the gate. The leader of the village watch, Pullman, gritted his teeth in frustration and anger. The sound of his grinding teeth was audible in the sudden silence following the chief's announcement. He looked at his men, ordinary farmers and laborers holding rusted spears, and asked if there was any way but to endure. His voice was a rasping growl, born from the helplessness of a man who wanted to fight but saw no path to victory. Then Cries approached them, his footsteps steady on the dry earth, saying it might not even take 7 days. His sudden interjection drew every eye toward him. With a confident tone, he said that if the plan they set up worked, they would prevail. His voice didn't waver, it had the sharp edge of a strategist who had accounted for every variable. Hearing they already had a plan, Pullman was shocked. He looked between Cries and the others with disbelief that a group of outsiders had calculated a move while the village was busy mourning. With a determined look, Cries reassured the villagers, stepping forward so that his shadow fell across the path. He spoke with a gravity that demanded attention, calling the village the foundation they had all built. He gestured to the walls, the houses, and the tilled fields that represented years of backbreaking labor. "I won't let a single knoll trample on it," he said, his voice dropping to a low, iron-hard register. Thus, another dawn appeared in the frontier village. The sky was a bruised purple, bleeding into a pale, sickly orange as the sun struggled to rise. The morning silence was shattered as the bell rang again, signaling the knoll's attack. The sound was frantic, a rhythmic clanging that sent birds scattering. Outside the wooden wall, Garn stood ready to fight in the tall, swaying grass, her silhouette stark against the rising light. Inside the fortification, Cries and Pin were in utter shock when they saw the gnolls approaching. This was not the disorganized mob they expected. This time, the nobles brought ladders. The sight was surreal, monstrous, fur-covered beasts carrying structured wooden implements of siege. The villagers couldn't believe the scene, it was a terrifying evolution of the threat. The monsters were no longer just biting and clawing, they were thinking. Garn also found it hard to believe that Hugo taught the gnolls the concept of ladders in just one night. She gripped her weapon, her eyes narrowing as she watched the organized advance. It was a feat of rapid indoctrination that shouldn't have been possible. Enkrid remarked, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos, that Hugo had more qualities of a teacher than a cultist. Seeing the casual chatter, Cries screamed at them from up the wall, his face turning a panicked shade of red. He asked if this was really the time to be so carefree, gesturing wildly at the approaching tide of fur and wood. "The moment they hit the walls, it's over," he warned. As Enkrid charged forward, the grass parting around his shins, he gestured to Garn. It was a silent, practiced movement between two people who had found a strange rhythm in the madness. Garn simply said, "It's good." She watched the line of monsters, her own aura beginning to shift as she focused on the clear targets. Enkrid then ordered the operation to start, his voice carrying across the field. Seeing only Enkrid and Garn charging toward hundreds of gnolls, Hugo laughed from the rear. He called them stupid bastards, his high, mocking sound carrying on the wind. To him, this was a suicide mission born of arrogance. "They have come out to die on their own 2 feet, he sneered, his eyes glowing with dark authority. He then ordered the gnolls to attack. The pack let out a collective, blood-chilling howl and surged forward like a tidal wave of filth. As Enkrid and Garn prepared to fight, they remembered the plan Cries made the previous night. The memory of the flickering candlelight in the war room flashed through their minds. Cries had said the premise was simple. One can only dismantle a colony by killing its leader. Pullman had added that if they recklessly dealt with the leader first, the gnoll pack would scatter. Cries had taken over, explaining that without a head, the gnolls would become 1,000 stinging wasps, making them impossible to pin down and a chore to suppress. He hated inefficiency more than he feared death. He then described the plan in detail. First, they would greatly reduce the number of gnolls. In the present, Enkrid went on a rampage. It was a display of martial prowess that defied logic as he cut through the monsters like paper. His blade was a blur of steel, leaving arcs of red in the morning air. He was a one-man army, a force of nature the monsters couldn't comprehend. As he moved forward, not one gnoll survived. He alone took on hundreds, his movements precise and lethal, a dance of death that left a trail of broken bodies. While killing them, Enkrid also made sure to destroy the ladders. He swung his heavy blade, splintering the rungs and snapping the side rails so they couldn't reach the wall. Seeing the rampage, Hugo was in utter shock, watching with his mouth wide open. The mockery vanished, replaced by a cold, prickling fear. He had expected a struggle, not a meat grinder. Garn was also in shock. She remembered that yesterday, Enkrid claimed he killed the gnoll leader alone. She hadn't believed it then, but now she realized it wasn't a lucky strike. She realized Enkrid had finally broken his stagnation. Garn had watched him for a long time, and to her, there were no signs of growth. He had reached the ceiling of his potential, yet in a short time, he became much stronger. What Garn didn't know was that Enkrid had relived the same days hundreds of times in a hidden time cycle. He had died, fought, and bled, polishing his skills to a mirror sheen. Every swing of his sword was backed by the muscle memory of 1,000 failed attempts. Garn's eyes started to glow as she used her talent appraisal skill. The world shifted into lines of power in her vision. She realized that Enkrid has grown strong enough to change the battlefield alone. The terrifying realization hit her when she saw that level of force. Enkrid was almost at the level of a quasi-knight. The weight of his will was beginning to manifest, a density of spirit that only the elite could achieve. Inspired by their leader carving through the horde, the village militia and ordinary villagers also joined in. They saw that the devil could bleed. The militia started raining down arrows on the gnolls from the wall, their aim shaky but bolstered by desperation. Ordinary villagers, who had never held a sword, started throwing rocks at the gnolls with everything they had. As Garn also joined the battle, she felt her heart beating with a frantic energy. Watching over Enkrid, she realized he was a mystery she couldn't solve. She felt like a young girl again, a strange sensation of wonder washing over her veteran soul. There was nothing but admiration in Garn's eyes as she watched the back of the man rewriting his own destiny. Enkrid kept butchering the gnolls without mercy. He was a whirlwind of steel and gore. Seeing this, Hugo panicked instinctively, his composure shattered. He wondered who that crazy bastard was as he watched his cultivated army dismantled in minutes. He was single-handedly mowing down almost 100 gnolls, Hugo whispered, his feet already backing away. Hugo realized they would be pushed back at this rate. The momentum of the siege had flipped entirely. As he started fleeing, he ordered the gnolls to retreat for now. He hoped to regroup and use the cult's dark arts to find another way. As Hugo was fleeing, he suddenly realized that Enkrid had stopped. The warrior was leaning on his sword, his shoulders heaving. Enkrid was panting heavily, his face drenched in sweat. He called for Garn, his voice sounding weak as his knees buckled. Garn caught him and held him up with sudden concern. Everyone was worried. The villagers on the wall stopped cheering, their hearts sinking. Enkrid whispered that he overdid it trying to catch the gnolls. Someone called for a doctor, the cry echoing across the bloodstained field. What Hugo didn't know was that it was all acting, part of Cry's Plan D. Seeing Ingrid's condition, Hugo stopped his flight. He turned back with a cruel sneer, laughing with confidence. To him, this made sense. Such power had to have a cost. He believed Enkrid burned out his life force for glory. Back to the previous night when Cry's was explaining his plan, Pullman had asked how they would kill Hugo. Pullman noted that Hugo wouldn't reveal himself easily, being cautious and intelligent, as shown when he was disguised in the militia. He didn't think Hugo would fall for a direct confrontation. With a scheming smile, Cry said that once that kind of guy is convinced of something, it becomes irreversible. The more intelligent they think they are, Cry's had whispered, the harder they fall for their own logic. Back to the present, Hugo ordered the retreating gnolls to attack again with manic glee. He thought the squad leader was too strong, and as long as that guy was there, it would be impossible to occupy the village. Hugo's ego swelled as he analyzed the situation. He thought the only time Enkrid could fight like that was for a moment. Hugo questioned if he should try to wear him down. He wouldn't rush in yet, he would use the remaining gnolls as a whetstone to blunt Ingrid's edge completely. Thus, the gnolls kept attacking for 4 days, trying to wear Enkrid down in a war of attrition. They attacked and retreated every day, never fully committing. Enkrid put dark ink on his eyes to make Hugo believe he was truly worn down. He made sure his movements became slower and his reactions duller. Seeing Enkrid from a distance, Hugo thought he must be exhausted. He watched the dark circles under his eyes and the way his sword arms seemed to tremble. Then suddenly, during a skirmish, one gnoll broke Ingrid's guard. The beast lunged, its teeth bared. It looked like a fatal mistake, but Garn saved him at the crucial moment, pushing the gnoll back to keep up the act. Enkrid started panting heavily, falling to one knee and using his sword as a crutch. He looked like a man at the end of his tether. Among the chaos, Hugo slowly approached Ingrid stealthily through the shadows. His eyes were fixed on the broken warrior, thinking Ingrid couldn't use the power of a quasi-knight anymore. Hugo tried to attack Ingrid with his authority to finish him off. He gathered dark energy, a foul aura concentrating in his hand as he closed the distance. As his attack was about to reach Ingrid from behind, the air seemed to freeze. With a swift motion, Ingrid turned back. There was no fatigue in his movement, the speed was blinding. He cut Hugo's arm clean off, spraying blood across the dirt. Hugo was in complete shock, staring at his stump and then at the man he thought was dying. Wiping the ink from under his eyes, Ingrid spoke in an arrogant tone, acting sure as difficult. The exhaustion and weakness were gone. Ingrid gave a condescending look to Hugo, the kind of predator gives to prey when the chase is over. Watching from the wall, Kreis told Pullman that they first had to show overwhelming force. With Hugo's intellect, he realized the leader couldn't be stopped by numbers alone, so Ingrid deliberately showed a tired appearance. A cautious guy will use all he can to win. Thus, Hugo used the gnolls to sap the leader's strength. Thanks to that, they dealt with most of the gnolls without Hugo realizing he was being used. With a confident smile, Kreis said the moment the cultist finally revealed himself, he fell neatly into the trap. Hugo started screaming in anger, clutching his arm and calling Ingrid a vermin. With an indifferent look, Ingrid simply asked if it wasn't the fault of the one who got scammed. His voice was cold and devoid of sympathy. Garn watched the scene from the side, seeing the blood on Ingrid's face. Her heart beat faster with admiration for the man who turned a hopeless siege into a masterclass of deception.